Good evening. This is the Burnsville Planning Commission. I'll call the meeting to order. Today is February 11th, and welcome everybody in the audience. Welcome Commission, city staff, those watching. The first item on our agenda is adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes from the Commission? Any changes from city staff?
No changes from staff.
Hearing no changes, I'll look for approval or adoption. So moved. In a second.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Julik and seconded by Mr. Corey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And that is approved. Brings us to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes from our January 14th, 2013 meeting. Any changes from Commission? And seeing none, any changes from city staff?
None.
I'll look for a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
And a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Singh, seconded by Mr. Tahuri. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And that motion also carries. Bringing us to item number 3, which is a public hearing for Fairview Health Services and Park Nicollet Clinic have submitted an application for a preliminary and final plat of 5-lot subdivision to be known as Ridge's 10th Edition. Concept stage PUD approval, rezoning from B3 PUD to mixed PUD, mixed to mixed PUD, comprehensive plan amendment from business retail office to mix, including the extension of Fairview Drive located east of Nicollet Avenue and south of Nicollet Boulevard. Mr. Slania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. There are a number of parts to this application. There are 2 property owners, actually 4 property owners if you count all the individual entities of Fairview and Park Nicollet. I'll try to summarize this with a few basic slides. After that, we can get into more detailed questions. We've got the team from Fairview representing both applicants. We've got their design team. We also have the city engineer and city staff here to answer questions on traffic and any other items that might come up. As you mentioned, we are dealing with a subdivision to be known as Ridge's 10th Edition. I apologize for the clarity on this, but I was trying to get it a scale that would fit the whole campus in. You'll see here Fairview Hospital, Park Nicollet Clinic, Fairview Drive to a certain point, and you'll see here Arthur Terrace comes in. This parcel adjacent to the hospital is not included in this subdivision. Here sits the 2 office buildings adjacent to the hospital. One of them is the clinic. This parcel right here is not included as it is a stormwater pond, and these parcels right here are not included. What is occurring with this subdivision is a land swap or land trade, if you will, between Park Nicollet and Fairview. The intent is to clarify essentially who owns what property once Fairview Drive is installed. Fairview would own everything on the east side. Sorry, this is Nicollet Boulevard, Nicollet Avenue right here. Arthur Terrace sits right here. Fairview would own everything on the east side of this. Park Nicollet would own everything on the west side. That obviously helps with future development, concentrations of green space, access, etc., etc. So that is the subdivision proposal. Right here you can see just dashed in the previously lot and blocks that were on the wrong side of Fairview Drive, essentially, for this redevelopment to occur. There are also rezonings that need to take place, and I'll address those very quickly right here. If I can find the correct sheet. put the project in perspective again, Nicollet Boulevard, Nicollet Avenue, Arthur Terrace, Fairview Drive to the extent it ends approximately here and turns to gravel to the south. These parcels were previously not zoned PUD. The age of the campus and the number of changes, this was just an error that staff caught this time through. We are rezoning these. Currently they are mix. We're rezoning them to mix PUD, so they are included in the campus, the Ridges campus. The applicant had done a nice job. These lots have always been included in their green space and hard surface requirements. That just didn't jive with some of the past files that the city had, so we are taking care of the rezoning here. Also outlined in the application is a rezoning and the comprehensive plan change. You'll recall in December, this parcel, Outlot A, just an acre in size, was subdivided from Nicollet Inn or Blythe Hospitality. And this application combines this outlot to the Fairview property, again for green space. Previously it was zoned B3 PUD to go along with the the hotel. It is now being zoned to mix PUD to go along with the hospital, and there is a comprehensive plan change from business retail office to mix. So those are some of the details outlined with this project. The final and last, not final, but another part obviously of the project is the extension of Fairview Drive. On the top you'll see the site as it exists today. Again, the pavement of Fairview Drive ends right here. This is dedicated right-of-way, however it is unimproved, it is gravel. Arthur Terrace is connected to Nicollet Avenue and is all gravel, unimproved. It serves the 3 single-family homes that are essentially up on the hill that you'll notice from Nicollet. The current connection with Nicollet Avenue right here is improved, is hard surface, but dead ends here because of the grades that run from here up top to Arthur Terrace. This provides the connection to the hotel that sits on the corner. Comparing this existing image to the proposed alignment for Fairview Drive, again the hospital sits right here. This is the approximate end of the pavement for Fairview Drive where the gravel begins. It does not follow the due south trajectory that's indicated in the current right-of-way. It does curve through the property, down the hill, and will connect with this existing stub street, if you will. So it will connect at Nicollet Avenue in the same spot. But as I said, there's a subdivision taking place to eliminate these lots. We're also moving right-of-way, so there's a substantial amount of land changing places, either between Fairview and Park Nicollet or being vacated by the city, because we know that Fairview Drive will not extend due south as it does now. So this will be vacated and new right-of-way is being dedicated as part of the application here tonight. The subject site, and that includes both properties, Park Nicollet and Fairview, is 13 acres in size. It consumes, with all these individual lots, 14 different parcels. The proposed plat of Ridge's 10th edition provides 2 buildable lots and 2 outlots. Let me think. I'll get to that visual in just one second. There is, as I said, land from Park Nicollet of almost 37,000 square feet given to Fairview. Fairview is giving a different 74,000 square feet to Park Nicollet with the inclusion of the vacated right-of-way in there. There's a substantial history on the site. I'm not going to go into all the details except that it was established in '74 as a mixed-use campus. It does include the YMCA, Prince of Peace, both of these entities. I believe in total it is over 100 acres in size. It is a planned unit development and has been from the 70s. We see this as a great benefit to the city. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan that we'll get to. It's consistent with the comp plan and the zoning for the districts, or at least once we get these few lots taken care of, it will be consistent. It is consistent with the green space allocations that were established back in 2003. That requires the total campus to provide a minimum of 40% green space campus-wide. There's obviously some sharing and cooperation between all these property owners to reach that 40%. We do see the extension of Fairview Drive as a great benefit with the project to help address circulation and traffic in and out of the campus. Again, the extension of Fairview Drive has been in the concept plan for the campus, I believe, since the beginning, and it's good to see now it's coming to fruition. We can certainly get into the traffic in more detail as we move along, but I wanted to summarize some of those details. As I mentioned, there is right-of-way being dedicated. Approximately 2 acres of the 39 acres of the subject site are encompassed within right-of-way. And again, all of the sites, once you've got the finished product of the campus, all of the properties do satisfy their intended green space, not only for the 40%, but each individual property does have a minimum green space requirement that we're trying to reach, and that is satisfied here as well. Once we move past tonight's application, we obviously have a number of items to address. Fairview is pursuing some of their other development intentions for the site. This was included in your packet. We are looking at a freestanding medical office building in this area. We're looking at a 3-story, approximately 400-car parking ramp in this area. These are certainly topics we need to cover tonight. They are not germane to the approvals because Fairview will be back in a month. Currently, staff is reviewing this, and we expect it to be in front of the Planning Commission and City Council in March to review the details of these buildings, the total number of square feet, the total number of parking stalls, the total impact on hard surface, and how that is all affected with these projects. But obviously we can't get to the office building, we can't get to the parking ramp until we know where Fairview Drive is realigned and until we have those lot combinations and the shifted ownership of that land, we simply can't get to the next stage. So if you'll recall, we did discuss the Outlot A, the Blythe Hospitality request for Outlot A. That was a minor step as we move forward. This is a secondary step, substantially bigger because it does involve much of the campus. It does involve multiple property owners, and with the request by the property owners that Fairview Drive indicated here is an improvement to be made by the city. It would not be constructed by the private ownership. It would be turned over to the city as a public improvement, and therefore assessed to the properties, to the adjacent properties and benefiting properties through a development agreement. So that is, again, part of the discussion we're going to have tonight is the alignment of that road, the configuration of the road. The final decision of the assessment and approving that public infrastructure falls to the City Council, which they'll be reviewing possibly at their next meeting as this moves forward. So again, this would be a public improvement. There are details being worked out between staff and the property owners for assessments and obligations should that move forward. I did mention the parking ramp and the medical office building. The specific details will be covered at the next stage. We expect that to be in March for design. Tree preservation is also being discussed. There will be trees removed with the grading for the Fairview Drive extension. There will be trees removed within the Fairview campus as we move forward with the medical office building and the parking ramp. Those have been calculated and are being tracked so that as future amendments are made or we reach a point where putting in the landscaping makes sense, we are tracking those dollar figures to ensure the correct plantings are in place. A couple conditions have been added, and I will review that as we go. Specific to the subdivision, there are appropriate easements in place. Staff finds the right-of-way to be adequate for the project. Drainage, utility, sidewalk easements are taken care of with the plat. Park dedication has been reviewed. Development fees also will be collected with the project. As I mentioned before, there are a number of benefits to the project. There are no deviations being requested by the applicant. The rezoning and comprehensive plan correct any inconsistencies we have there. And at this point, we're not looking at much in the way of buildings or parking setbacks and things like that, so there are no deviations there. We'll address those as they arise with the next stage. As I said, we have staff here that can address the traffic. We've also reviewed stormwater, and that is consistent with the ordinance requirements. I'd like to get into the conditions if we can. The last page of the report, we were included 7 conditions. The first one, in speaking with the applicant, has changed slightly. Prior, I had included Park Nicollet, that the improvements for, the tree replacement of $16,000 be paid by Park Nicollet. Speaking with the applicant, that is actually tree replacement that comes with the grading and the dedication of the right-of-way. So rather than calling out Park Nicollet specifically, it is being paid by the applicant, which is Park Nicollet and Fairview, and that will be divvied up as those two parties agree through the development contract. So that was a change. Also noted in the conditions are $19,000 of tree replacement specifically for Fairview, the design of a pedestrian walkway across Nicollet Boulevard, signal installation at Nicollet Boulevard and Fairview Drive, Nicollet Boulevard and Prince of Peace signal, and Fairview Drive and Fairview Ridge's ramp access. Let me step back and address just a couple of these as we go. In addition to the medical office and the parking ramp being made for Fairview, there's also an improvement proposed for Prince of Peace Church on the north side of Nicollet Boulevard. As you noted in some of these images, the medical office building, the parking ramp are going to displace a lot of surface parking. Now the ramp will replace some of it, but the office building will also create a higher demand. Fairview works very closely with Prince of Peace and does have an agreement to share the parking lot on the north side of Nicollet Boulevard. During the week, during peak time, many Fairview Hospital, either clinic or hospital employees utilize that, and they are crossing Nicollet Boulevard. As part of the public improvements with Fairview Drive and the added number of employees using that site, we are reviewing an application to extend or expand the Prince of Peace parking lot. With that additional parking, we are reviewing pedestrian access routes or pedestrian crossings so hospital employees can safely cross Nicollet Boulevard, whether they're getting to the clinic or they're coming in the main entrance to the north on the north side of the hospital. So that is one of the details we are working through with the applicant that will be reviewed by the City Council at their next meeting. We can get into some of the details tonight should you choose, but that was a condition that we worked through these, any last details, finalize costs and so forth. That was a condition in the agreement. There's also the intention that in the future there could be a signal at this location as well as a signal right here. In the future, when full build out or the application reaches full build out, there will be a substantial amount of traffic. So understanding that we're putting the road in now, we will obviously have a signal at Fairview Drive and Nicollet where there is one now, but over time as this campus grows, we can get into some of the traffic numbers. There will be additional signals as we move on. Commissioners, I know you have a number of questions, so we'll get to those. In summary, staff is supportive of the application. We believe we've got the details worked out with the applicant and with both parties for the development contract and the public improvements. The conditions that were included are part of staff's recommendations. We can take questions as you see fit.
Thank you, Mr. Slaney. Excellent presentation. Before we get to the questions from Commission, I just want to clarify one thing. On condition number 1, you changed not only the name, but you also changed the date.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
In discussions with Park Nicollet, they do believe a project is coming. I had initially included an end date of December 31st, 2015. We've pushed that out to try to coincide with their development process, so we're not planting trees twice or taking down trees that have just been planted.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. With that, I'll open up for questions. Mr. Singh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very good presentation, Chris. This is a very complex matter with all of this in the application as well as what to come, things that staff are reviewing right now. One of my concerns here is traffic. And my first question is the Fairview Drive, that will be a 3-lane road. Am I right?
Correct.
Will it be two-way traffic or one-way?
It will be two-way traffic with a center turn lane available throughout the, basically throughout the expansion.
And I assume that Fairview Drive will continue to be the road for the hospital as well as Park Nicollet Clinic. Am I right?
Correct, and if I can even expand on that, the role of Fairview Drive is changing quite a bit with this project. Again, you'll see many of these details as we move forward, but the quickest way to access this office building from 42 will be to come up Nicollet, get on Fairview Drive, and come up what is now that very steep hill. Not only are we looking at a medical office building, Fairview Hospital is looking at not necessarily reorientating, but adding a second entrance so that much of the front look of their hospital faces south. And again, the quickest way to get to this main entrance and to the main parking area, if you will, would be to come up Nicollet, to come up Fairview Drive.
Thank you. If I may just, for the benefit of the viewing and listening audience, I will ask this question. The cost of regrading and rebuilding Fairview Drive will be borne by the two entities, Park Nicollet and Fairview, not the city.
That is the proposal at this time.
Thank you.
Certainly the council will finalize that.
You mentioned about the conditions, and as it is right now, we have two conditions about the cost of tree replacement. Are we making that, adding the cost to one cost and dividing it between the two entities? So it's going to be one condition instead of two.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that's a great question, and actually a conversation the applicant and I just had earlier today. Because of the ownership of the property, it's best that it stays as two conditions. And if I can, the second condition, 19,000, relates specifically to land that Fairview will own, assuming this subdivision moves forward. The solely owned by Fairview. The other number is trees that will be removed as part of the grading project within the right-of-way. As part of the public improvements, those two entities are bearing those costs. So it will be divvied between those two.
One other question I have right now regards parking. In your presentation, you mentioned that hospital staff and visitors can park in the Prince of Peace parking lot. How will that impact Prince of Peace on when they have funerals, weddings, Sunday services, or any other event that would require the need for lots of parking for Prince of Peace? How would that? They also have to meet certain requirements as far as parking is concerned. Are we going to compromise that requirement by having hospital employees and visitors park over there?
Great question again, Commissioners. We're not compromising Prince of Peace in any way. Let me first clarify, we're looking at solely Fairview employees. We're not intending visitors there or anyone else to park in that area. And this arrangement with Fairview and Prince of Peace has been ongoing for many years. To the benefit of Prince of Peace, or I guess to the benefit of both parties, the parking lot being utilized is on the far south side of Prince of Peace. Not necessarily connected, obviously it's all Prince of Peace parking, but it's not necessarily connected with their worship parking areas.
Thanks for the explanation. Appreciate it.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Drillick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to touch back on the public improvements, Chris, a little bit. These are being done, there's a state law that allows owners of a percentage of the land along the right-of-way to petition for the public improvements and then have them be funded and come off their tax rolls. Is that how this is being funded, through that law, or what allows them to petition the city to do the improvements and then finance it through assessment?
It is per state statute 429.
Okay, so
It is.
All right, so there's no special treatment. It's state statute. It has to be
Correct.
done. Okay,
Correct.
all right. And so just a quick question on that. Does it meet the requirement of the percentage of landowners? I can't quite tell. Are they all the landowners where the right-of-way will be, or where the road will be extended and improved?
That's a great question, which is why we brought so many city staff tonight. I've got Ryan Peterson's our city engineer, or Brian Hillgardner's our engineering consultant. I don't know which of you wants to field, and then we can get into some traffic questions also.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair and Commissioners, as far as that question goes, the properties, again, are being consolidated within the plat so that there will be two primary landowners, being Fairview and Park Nicollet. So they are going to be the two primarily and sole parties in the development contract being assessed for all the costs.
Yeah, the reason I ask is primarily on the south there, where it's adjacent to the hotel. Is the hotel on board with the petition too?
Currently, the petition is between the two, Park Nicollet and Fairview. There is an agreement that, there's an agreement that Nicollet Inn or Blythe would not be assessed as part of this project.
Okay, all right. Okay, and does, on that same topic, on Blythe while we're there, but after removal of that outlot, is their property still compliant with the green space requirements?
It is. Commissioners, I know this was a while ago. When we divvied up the outlot, we did analyze all those numbers back in December, so that as soon as Outlot A was divided, well, let me get to the creation of Outlot A, when Planning Commission and Council reviewed it in December, confirmed that there was sufficient green space parking, etc. So Nicollet Inc. can continue and operate without that green space.
Okay, all right. And then can you share a little bit more on the turnaround for the three existing houses? Your text sort of ended a little bit. Wasn't, and maybe I missed it earlier in your explanation, but that turnaround off of Nicollet serving the remaining two houses, I guess?
I can get the visual. Brian, would you mind just covering the...
Sure. Commission members, essentially there's going to be a cul-de-sac at the end of, I guess it'd be that third house to the east. What was proposed originally was a typical type of gravel cul-de-sac. After looking at some of the grading implications that there would be with the city's project, it was decided to put in a hammerhead type of a turnaround at that location. That portion of the turnaround is not going to be a part of the plat necessarily, so there's going to be a temporary easement over that in the interim. And the timing of that has been another thing that has changed quite a bit. So I don't know that all three of those homes may be gone sooner than later as well. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. But there will be a temporary easement with a hammerhead type of turnaround in the interim until those properties are vacant.
Okay, and those properties are, thank you, and those properties are owned by one of the applicants, and so
Correct.
it's not, the rental properties now, but it's not impacting any homeowners or anything like that?
Correct. I can let the applicant address that for as much as they can. As I've been told, the renters have been put on notice, and they have acknowledged that third house is coming down. They are owned by Park Nicollet.
Okay, and then just one last question, sorry for taking so much time here, but just on the green space, I was a little bit confused in the table that you had in the text. And maybe you can just shed the requirements. You've got an overall 40% green space requirement, but then there can be some variation within each parcel, or
Yes, and I apologize. I forgot to put the chart onto a slide, but this is page 8 of your packet. The top of page 8, as indicated, we're trying to keep track of all this development as we go. Really, the far right column is probably the most important. The third from the right is probably the next important. So as you go through these, you'll notice that the different uses, YMCA, Prince of Peace, etc., have percentages tied to them. That is the far right is the minimum threshold they need to stop at. The percent green space column, the third to the right, or third from the right, is a snapshot of where they are either today or with some of these proposed developments. So let's take YMCA for example. Currently they're sitting just under 60% green space, and they are allowed a minimum of 43%. So it tells us how much they have to give. So Park Nicollet, you'll notice currently sits at 70%. They're allowed to go down to 30%. Previous to this exchange of land and the right-of-way, they were closer to 77%. So they did see a drop. Going down to what I have as Fairview Ridges, their total PUD area, again, their minimum is 30%. They are at 34.35, and I believe they were closer to 36 or 37 before all of this occurred.
so the splits push things around the edges essentially, but every property will be compliant both with the overall minimum and the overall PUD area is compliant.
Correct. And we will most likely revisit this chart again with the medical office building and the ramp, simply so that we can adopt these as the amendments go through, so we have an accurate image of what's going on.
Right. And then I guess one final question, there's no issues with the vacation of the existing right-of-way there?
Not at this time, correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Let's see, no other questions right now. I'll throw mine out. So how come we're still doing the outlots? Explain to me
Sure.
why we still need outlots in this.
Let me find a good image to reflect that. Okay. Again, I apologize for how blurry this is. This is Lot 1, Block 2. Again, this is the Fairview Hospital. This is a majority of the development. Again, falling to the east side of Fairview Drive. Right here you'll see Lot 1, Block 1 of Ridges 10th. That is Park Nicollet. That runs right in this area here. Park Nicollet owns it. Park Nicollet also owns Outlot A and Outlot B. At this time, that is 100% green space. They do envision development on those lots or parts of those lots, but because they don't have a specific plan right now, Park Nicollet has proposed outlots for two reasons. One, tax implications are less for an outlot, and until they know what their development plan is, they're saving money. And two, also based on saving money, the park dedication for those or any outstanding fees for those, I don't think park dedication is due, would not be paid until they're platted into buildable lots. So it is simply putting those lots into a holding pattern. We can't issue a building permit for them. They can't build on them until they're brought back for a plat.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just want to comment on one item that Chris discussed there. Those two outlots still will not be subject in the future to park fees or stormwater fees. They've all been paid as a part of previous plats.
Okay.
And we made that clear within the development contract so that that can be referenced in the future for clarification. So those, as far as park and stormwater fees go, they have
Already
been
been paid.
addressed.
Thank you, Brian. I think you mentioned this before, but this all complies with our comprehensive plan, and we're going to make a few adjustments to.
Correct. With this Ridges campus being around for as long as it has, it's always been contemplated for this type of dense mixed use. I think I talked about it briefly in the report, but there are all different kinds of uses here, which is why just a year or two ago, I think Ms. Garris was here, we converted the zoning from a residential, an R3C, to zone it mixed so it could be more comprehensive, because we've got religious assembly, all kinds of senior living, clinics, hospitals, and so forth. So we are consistent with the comp plan.
Okay, good. Going to the street, was there any thought? It doesn't look like there's a sidewalk put along it. Was there any thought about pedestrian traffic along the street?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, there is a sidewalk. I'm going to let Brian go just so I don't go hoarse.
Maybe I just missed it on the.
Yeah, the submittals. I don't know what Mr. Slaney had in the packet itself, but the final construction documents were reviewed and do include sidewalks. So there's considerable consideration to pedestrian traffic. All of it being tied together with not only the Principe but everything along Fairview Drive as well. So there is sidewalks included and crossings.
Oh, okay, thank you. Because I envision, people might want to walk from the hotel up to the hospital if they have, people there, and didn't want them dodging cars on the way up. So at the north end along Nicollet Boulevard, one of the conditions is that we might put a traffic control in there in the future. If we see that or you don't have to push that, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know.
We'll have to train them after.
You guys have to train me, Mr. Chair and Commission members. There was some improvements that were identified in the initial improvements. Again, that was the signal at the intersection of Fairview Drive and Nicollet Avenue, and again, that's kind of a realignment of the actual signal system in place because it'll be a dual left turn lane, and the timing, of course. As far as the signals in the future, there was a traffic report done, or a traffic study that was done, that identifies development in 2035. It did also identify the initial development in 2014. So there's kind of that unknown in between 2014 and 2035. So again, as new developments or new buildings come in or PUDs come in for additional structures with Park Nicollet or additional structures with Fairview, those traffic studies will have to be updated and basically confirmed to see when those initial warrants would warrant a stop or a signal. Right now, all of the intersections that are referenced in the future are operating at acceptable conditions of a level of service C or better.
Okay. And I I think Chris mentioned this, but the council is going to look at crossing Nicollet Boulevard for pedestrians, because I know they have one of those blinky lights now, but those really don't mean much to people cruising down Nicollet Boulevard. So I hope that you guys will come up with something that will address that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that is part of the petition by the property owners to put in a more sophisticated public crossing there. We are working on the details. I'll let Mr. Peterson get into some of the details if we.
Yeah, there's basically it's a new type of flashing device system that we've looked into. We had a meeting last Friday. Had the proprietor come in and basically identify these. There was a couple different ones with their there's in pavement type of flashing devices. There's also, and they're LED. These are all LED lights. I would. When I was looking at it at the presentation, it reminded me of the warning lights on top of a city vehicle of some sort. Very flashy, very catchy. Almost if it was a different color, it'd be a police vehicle type. They not only have those in the pavement, but they also have those on-mounted traffic signs. Discussion's has gone on about how many signs do we have? Do we have one on obviously both sides of the crossing? Do we also put one in at the median? Those are the discussions that are going on right now. We have not come to a conclusion on those. Again, being a condition, will have to be approved prior to the Prince of Peace PUD being approved.
Okay.
So.
Just out of curiosity, are those something that are controlled by pedestrians?
Yes, I should have answered that. They are. There is a push button, and there is a timing associated with that. And again, that was the reason we looked at possibly having one in the median, as if somebody doesn't get fully across and needs to reset that.
Okay.
They would push that again.
Okay, thank you. And then, so my last question is, I think you mentioned this is going to be a 3-lane road for most part, but the middle lane is going to be either left or right turn?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I'll let Brian cover that, but then before he wraps up, maybe we could talk about the intersection at Nicollet Avenue.
Sure.
Just so the Commissioner is aware of what turn lanes and so forth are going on
Okay,
there.
that'd be great.
Mr. Chair and Commission members, at that intersection there will be basically 4 different lanes with a median. The right turn-in lane off of Nicollet Avenue will obviously be 1 lane, and then there will be a median, followed by, as you go south to north, there will be 2 left turn lanes coming out of Fairview Drive, turning left onto Nicollet Avenue, and then there will be 1 through lane or right turn lane coming off of Fairview Drive onto Nicollet Avenue. And again, at this time, with the improvements, even with the initial improvements, this will still be at a acceptable level of service. It's just that the timing, obviously, and some of the location of the signal needs to be revised because the widths are changing of the street and configuration.
Was there any thought ever about putting in a real median in that street and having left turn lanes?
I guess I can't answer that. I don't have the history on all that. I might have to.
It was important for the city and the applicants to look at the right-of-way width that we're dealing with, because green space is an issue. You put the median in there, all of a sudden the street gets wider and wider. This way we can utilize that, I guess, left turn lane both directions more easily than with the median.
Okay. And then the hospital signs that direct people off the freeway, they'll have them going up Fairview Drive. They'll be, instead of going all the way up to Nicollet Boulevard.
It's to be determined, all of the details, but there will be signage package with the medical office building, with the ramp, to get customers and patients where they need to be.
I was talking about those blue H.
Yeah, that's something we haven't discussed, but we can
Okay.
address that.
I just wondered if that's going to be the primary route.
It is intended.
Yeah, according to the traffic study, looking at the volumes created at that right turn movement, that is the planned movement that would be done.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now. Looks like I've generated a few questions here, so we'll go to Mr. Julik.
Thanks, Chair. Just a little bit more questions on the intersection with Nicollet Avenue. So coming that's Fairview Drive, right? Is that a controlled interchange?
Yes.
So there'll be a stoplight there? Or?
Yes, there is currently a stoplight there now. It's just being reconfigured. It's the timing and the location of the poles and whatnot may be revised, but there will be a signalized intersection at Fairview Drive and Nicollet Avenue.
Excuse me.
You're talking Nicollet Boulevard.
Nicollet
There
Boulevard.
will not be a signalized intersection at this time. The traffic volumes do not warrant it at this time, but in the future, again, as additional PUDs would come in, that traffic study needs to be analyzed to find out when it would warrant a signal. At this time, it'll just be a stop sign, essentially.
Okay, so if I'm coming off 42, I'm going up Nicollet, I'll have a right turn lane that will be added or not?
There is not a right turn lane planned at this time on Nicollet Avenue either.
Aren't you telling us that's where the bulk of the traffic's coming in?
That is what the study shows.
And we wouldn't put a right turn lane there?
The study did not warrant it because it's a right turn movement. It's a fairly quick movement. So at this time, the traffic study did not warrant that.
There's a lot of traffic there, and already with this Class F intersection at Nicollet and 42, correct?
Yes, there's definitely a regional issue with that intersection that needs to be handled as a part of a bigger project. Ryan and I have discussed this at length, and there's definitely a bigger issue with the whole Nicollet 42 type area that we need to dive into.
And would you be allowed to take a left turn out onto Nicollet?
Yes.
And
There is dual left turn lanes.
And this is all borne out by the traffic study. It
Correct.
seems like a bad situation is getting exacerbated, especially with the two left-hand turns there. Nicollet's difficult. I mean, you've got the situation with with people coming out from the fast food area and that shopping center. There's no ability to. There's no. That's uncontrolled there. You've got them coming out from the other side uncontrolled, and you've got this added into the mix.
I think Mr. Peterson wants to.
Yeah, members of the commission, maybe a couple things to point out. The intersection that's a level service F is County Road 42 and Nicollet Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
The Nicollet Avenue Fairview Drive, that is maybe a B or an A level service. So we're not having issues right there right now. And the two left turns and how they've designed the road should function just fine at that location.
What's the road that's being extended and coming south and hitting Nicollet Avenue?
This is if you were, members of the commission, if you were to go here, this is the north entrance into the Nicollet Inn. And then the cobblestone lane over to the strip mall and that sort of thing is over here. So maybe you're confusing
Is that straight across into?
Yes.
Ah,
So
okay.
the one to the south is the uncontrolled one where you can get into Arby's and McDonald's and that.
Okay.
So we're one north of there, and right now we are not having issues traffic-wise at this intersection. And it's our belief that the two left turn lanes are going to handle all the traffic going out. And given that Nicollet Avenue northbound is two lanes, basically a right turn without a right turn lane still works quite well. The left turns is where you really suffer if you don't have a left turn lane. We feel the right turn lane is definitely going to be adequate. And one nice thing, there is a wide right-of-way there. So let's say your concerns are realized in the future, it wouldn't be terribly difficult to add a right turn lane in. It just doesn't appear that it's going to be necessary.
I'm a little bit concerned about the two left turns because you've already got traffic struggling to turn left or right from straight across coming out of Cobblestone. And given all the traffic that's coming off 42, seems a little bit dangerous to me.
Point of clarification, I don't think that's cobblestone. there, just for the record. Cobblestone is just north of there.
Yep.
Going into Arthur Terrace, correct?
No.
Is that,
No,
you may
it'll-
want to use that.
Yeah. Can you pull up a
It'll
bigger
come
map?
down and go right into it.
That,
right here?
the stub road for Fairview Drive exists
Yep.
now, and it's straight across from Cobblestone, and there's a dead end, and there's a giant hill in front of it. That's the road that goes across.
It's not going to come here. It's
No, and this is Cobblestone Lane, though, isn't it?
Can you,
Cobblestone Court.
Cobblestone Court. Okay, that's what I just wanted to differentiate is Cobblestone Lane and Cobblestone Court,
The
right?
private entrance into the,
Okay, we're calling it Cobblestone. Okay, sorry, just wanted to make sure we got.
no, if you're,
I've got the right entrance because I'm seeing two different things. So
Ryan, could you pull up, use that aerial photo and just go to the overhead camera? That might help. I know it doesn't bring everything out as far as we'd like, but
okay, I'm sorry.
there is,
This is where the location will be.
correct. And there is one more intersection south of there
Right. This,
before 42.
this is the Roasted Pear and Arby's, correct?
correct.
Yeah, so that's the intersection we're talking about. And this is already signalized. There is a signal light there already. Getting into the dual lefts, I think that is only going to help the functionality of it. What may end up being the situation is Nicollet Avenue will have green time going north and south at the same time, where the east-west movements might be split phase, where all the movements from the east to the west will go on a green plus a left green, and then the other direction from the west side to the east would then have their own time. That detail will have to get sorted out. But certainly the dual lefts should help the traffic as opposed to hinder, make it any worse.
Okay, thank you.
makes sense.
Any other questions? Pat? No? Mr. Corey?
Just to, I think I know the answer, but I just want to be clear. When you said that the traffic studies were, C or above, is that including the planned development now, or is that something that will have to be studied later?
Mr. Chair and Commission members, that does include the development taking place as a part of this original plat.
Okay, so for the new
Correct.
stuff that's coming
Correct.
in. Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Mr. Tahiri?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for the entire development, have the city looked at the ratio of the development to the site? Is there a city ordinance restriction? I'm just looking at the whole picture as one entity versus the applicable site. Is there any city
For
stringence about ratio of development to the given site, or perhaps it's been
I guess, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, let me just clarify, are we talking building square footage or green space or parking or
just the
traffic?
overall development? Is there any rules or?
There is, and I'll just use green space for an example. In a general business district, which most of 42 is, Burnsville Center is, etc., the minimum green space is 25%. You've got setbacks, parking calculations, etc. The Ridges campus actually has a higher threshold with a green space of 40% with separate setbacks, separate calculations. So there is a total threshold that they cannot exceed. And we're certainly within that capacity.
I have one more question. That's more in line of design concern. Mainly when we create or design a complex project to this capacity, that consequently increase the pedestrian activities, involvements, flow, traffic, whatever we call. And in a sense, in my opinion, we're designing an outdoor sort of like airport with a lot of functions. We don't want to make sure the people, the pedestrians, the users, they don't just float around and wander around and go from places to places and get lost in a parking lot from one building to another building. Is there any consideration of a guidance, some type of a flow design for pedestrians so they don't basically wander around the parking lot asking where things are at or get lost, and especially when the complex have a similar functionality as this. I don't know if I'm clear on this.
You are, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. You'll see those details, sidewalks. You'll see more of the orientation of the buildings when we look at that medical office building and when we look at the ramp. I think this is intimidating because it is multiple entities you're seeing all at once. Not that someone couldn't go from Park Nicollet to Fairview, but it's unlikely. They'll probably stay on the Fairview campus or the Park Nicollet campus, not necessarily interconnecting between the two. But I think we'll be able to better explain that with this next round.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Good. Mr. White?
Just a quick question again on the intersection with Fairview and Nicollet Avenue. You were saying that was grade A or B. Would that be even after this is completed, right? Or is that just today?
Mr. Chair and Commission members, it is after it is completed, after this first round of this plat goes through with that development occurring, it will be at a level of service C, which is again acceptable. As far as in the future, after subsequent development occurs with, say they go more stories on the Fairview side or Park Nicollet develops their complex, that's when the additional traffic studies will need to be studied and evaluated, because the 2035 volume numbers indicate that some of those intersections will then move beyond the level of service C.
Okay. And then is the long-term plan for Arthur Terrace, it sounds like Park Nicollet owns that and would look to redevelop that. Would the intention be to remove the Arthur Terrace entrance onto Nicollet Avenue and use Fairview Avenue to service that?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions? I wrote down a spot to ask or write down questions for the applicant, but I didn't hear any. Were there any? Or does the applicant kind of want to come up and address the commission? I don't think we have any questions for you, but.
Is there, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Is there anything I missed, Bruce or John? If I misspoke or got anything incorrect, let us know.
Okay. I think it's already been mentioned, this is a very complex project and a lot of moving wheels, but right now we're looking at the road and kind of the rezoning. I'm sure our next meeting in March will be a lot longer and a lot more questions when they actually come up with the plans to build something, so I look forward to that meeting. This is a public hearing, so at this time I'll open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter, now is your chance. Please come forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and open up for discussion. Mr. Singh.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I think this is actually phase 2 that is coming to the Planning Commission.
You're right.
We had the phase 1 earlier, and I think we will be looking at more developments as plans proceed. I feel that this is a compliment to our city, that both Park Nicollet and Fairview see the need to expand, because that's what they're going to do. Park Nicollet will expand according to the information provided to us, and Fairview is expanding right now. I think it speaks well to our city working with these businesses to make them more attractive, so that people not only from Burnsville but from other communities can come and be served. I commend staff for working with the applicant on this matter. There are a lot of pieces to it, and things are progressing satisfactorily. I thank staff for doing this. I must say that I also commend the applicant for working with staff to see that things go well, so that we don't, everything is very clear to us and they have the answers to our questions. I will definitely support this, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Corey?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I will be supporting this. I think it's excellent that in this day and age now, when we're looking for development and construction projects and everything else, and this is looks like going to be a major one in a number of steps coming to Burnsville. I think that's great. I think we should do everything we can to support it and make it as smooth as possible for all the participants. And so with that, I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. See no one else, I'll throw in my, I'm in full support of this also. I'm glad that Fairview was, selected back in the 70s to build here, and this is a regional hospital. It's not just a Burnsville hospital. It's the, hospital south of the cities, and it's a great asset. I mean, I live 3 minutes from it, and I've utilized it in the past, so I'm glad it's there, and happy to see that Fairview's continuing and Park Nicollet invest into our city. I think the city staff has done a great job, and I know traffic is a big concern for us, and unfortunately, or fortunately I should say, 42 is such a busy area that we have these major traffic problems down there, which is a good thing, right? I mean, it's a huge road already, and people flock to our city to shop and go to the hospital and do other activities, so it is a good problem to have. I don't know how they're going to solve it in the future, but the traffic guys are smarter than us, or smarter than me, I should say. So I'm in full support of it, and look forward to our next meeting when Fairview's coming back to see what kind of improvements they have in store for our building, or for our city. Mr. Julik?
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's appropriate still to ask a few more questions.
Certainly.
It's on the conditions. And Mr. Slaney, maybe you can help me on condition number 5. It says, and 6 is the same verbiage. It says signal installation will occur when signal warrants are met and deemed necessary by the city engineer. Is that what was wanted to be said there, or what does it mean when signal warrants are met?
Certainly. Signal warrants are just a type of way of analyzing an intersection, and warrants are criteria or grades or something like that. So if you're having trouble at an intersection, you're meeting 2 or 3 or more warrants, which then would tell the city engineer staff that it's time for an intersection.
Okay, all right.
So it's not just arbitrary based on the city engineer. It is warrants and staff's decision.
Okay, thank you. And then one more question along those lines. You reference both in conditions 5 and 6. You reference the Nicollet Boulevard and Fairview Drive intersection, but there's nothing with respect to the Fairview Drive and Nicollet Avenue intersection in any of the conditions. Is there any consideration due there, or was that discussed, or what?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, just to confirm, Fairview Drive and Nicollet Avenue, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Let me rephrase that. There is a signal there now, and there are improvements to be made to that with this initial construction of.
So that will go in right away.
It will happen, correct?
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, just given, I agree with the fellow commissioners here that it is a welcome addition to the Burnsville expansion of a regional hospital, and I think a good job is done by all addressing what's a kind of a sticky traffic issue that's not necessarily associated with that area, but the area in general. And so I think staff did a great job working with the applicant, and I'll be in favor of recommending this plan also.
Any other comments? I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I beg to move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the application for preliminary and final plat of a 5-lot subdivision to be known as Ridges 10th Addition, concept stage PUD approval, rezoning from B3 PUD to MIX PUD, MIX to MIX PUD, comprehensive plan amendment from business retail office to MIX, an extension of Fairview Drive located east of Nicollet Avenue and south of the Nicollet Boulevard, with the following 7 conditions. Do I need to read the conditions? Okay.
Just, can you note that it's the condition not in our, or on the new condition one, instead of the one in our packet?
Yes, the condition 1, which states the required tree replacement amount for Park Nicollet is $16,982.58. Park Nicollet shall provide the city a planting plan and schedule satisfying this amount in conjunction with the next PUD amendment or no later than December 31, 2015. This would be jointly with Fairview and Park Nicollet. Right now it's stated Park Nicollet, but it will be jointly, right?
As referenced by staff.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Motion made by Mr. Singh, seconded by Mr. Julik. Are there any other discussions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign, and the motion carries 5-0. This will go to the City Council meeting, which is next Tuesday, February 19th, and it's been changed till 5 o'clock instead of the normal 6:30 time. So please note that it's a 5 o'clock meeting next week for the City Council. Oh,
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify for the public, the applicant, that we changed the date also from the December 31st, 2015 to 2018.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Slania. And thank you, Mr. Peterson and Mr. Hillgardner, for joining us tonight in this long process. So, thank you. And good luck next week at the council meeting. Which brings us to item number 4, which is another public hearing for Lindell Terminal Company application for a PUD amendment to rebuild the Holiday gas station located at 14150 Irving Avenue South. And before I go to Mr. Slaney, I want to just note that the commission received a email from Triland, or Mr. Slaney received an email from Triland. He printed it out and gave it to us, and this will go into the record.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We will put it in part of the public record.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Slania.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, this project isn't quite as complex as the last one, but needless to say, it is a very, very good project. If you have been by this gas station recently, it is in need of redevelopment, and thankfully the property owner is in front of us this evening for a planned unit development amendment to do that. The site in question exists as a Holiday Station store, is on the northwest corner of Irving Avenue and 42. The use will remain the same, which is consistent with comprehensive plan and the zoning and previous PUD approvals for the site. What you're looking at on this aerial photo is I suppose the original Holiday gas station for the site. It does have 2 exit points off of Irving Avenue. It does not have an access from 42. That will not change. It does share parking parking and access easements with the adjacent property, who is Triland Properties. I apologize, I'm trying to find the right sheet here as we move forward. The gas station was originally constructed in 83, as was construction of the adjacent shopping center when Lyndale Terminal owned both parcels. Since then, Lyndale Terminal has ceased ownership of the larger shopping center and just owns the subject site. The proposal by the applicant is for redevelopment of the gas station. It would include, does include, new building, parking lot, location of the fuel tanks underground will be moved, and new fueling canopy, new pumps, etc. The few things that are remaining the same would be the access points. Again, the curb cuts off of Irving Avenue will remain the same. They do function properly, as staff can tell you, and it gives us proper distance from 42, which is not thus not an issue. The one thing you'll notice currently when you access the fueling station or the fuel pumps, you're perpendicular to the front of the building, which just causes access and other issues. With this design, I would call it Holiday's current corporate design. You're pulling into the site, you're pulling forward up against the pump, and you are facing the building. It helps with traffic flow. It also helps with enforcement for Holiday with drive-offs, other things, other benefits to the site. So vehicles will be coming in facing the building, and then they can exit, assuming they come in the southern drive, they can exit to the north, or they can cross and go to the adjacent shopping center. With the other redevelopment the Planning Commission saw at Nicollet and Highway 13, there are also parking stalls adjacent to the building, which provides easy access into the site for customers. As I said, if you've been by the site, the building is in need of redevelopment. There are great architectural improvements to the site, site circulation, stormwater improvements. Staff feels that this is not an impediment to the neighborhood at all, but rather an investment by Holiday into this site and should be a benefit to the adjacent properties. There are two deviations being requested by the applicant. The first addresses green space. Around the building, there's a minimum of 50% green space required when you're immediately adjacent to the building of the footprint. You'll notice half of the building is eliminated, or one side of the building is eliminated right here, and due to the odd or unique configuration of the car wash with the trash enclosure, recycling back here, they are not satisfying the 50%. They are 39%, so just a few linear feet short of that requirement. The other item addresses specifically landscaping requirements for gas stations, and this is intended to provide sufficient buffering, especially if there's a single-family residential in the area. It requires a 10-foot landscape buffer along the front, which would be Irving Avenue, and a 5-foot landscape buffer on the sides, which is adjacent to the shopping center. because of the width of the right-of-way for Irving Avenue, the property line falls almost right through the middle of the landscape medians between Irving Avenue and the gas station. The buffer is there, it's just not solely within Holiday property, and thus the deviation is requested. The same applies for the sides. There is to be a 5-foot landscape area, and again, in this situation, the gas station's abutting an adjacent commercial parking area. There is landscaping planted and proposed. However, it doesn't satisfy that minimum requirement, and thus a deviation is needed. The applicant does provide sufficient green space for the total site, 31%. That is actually an increase from the current situation on site. There is sufficient parking on site as well. There is within the parking lot around the site substantial landscaping, which again is an improvement from the current site. I did state there is one aspect of the site remaining, that is the pylon sign that you'll notice at Irving and 42. That is compliant with the regulations, height, size, and so forth. The applicant is not proposing to remove that. One item I'd like to address is the freestanding freestanding car wash for the gas station. Again, the site it sits as a triangle on a corner lot. It's not the most ideal for redevelopment. I know the applicant's done a great job to fit this in. Rather than having the gas station attached, which I'm sure is Holiday's first choice, we do have a freestanding car wash right here. We do have sufficient stacking around at the back of the building to provide the needed queuing requirements. There's also an emergency or bypass lane. Should the line be too long or something happens, you're not interested in entering the car wash, you can peel off from that line and get out of the process. The whole site, both building and car wash, are designed of brick material consistent with the ordinance. Brick EIFS. Here are a couple renderings. Actually, here are a couple renderings of the site. These were included in your packet. This first one is if you're looking north and west from the intersection of Irving and 42, you'll see substantial grade change. I believe we indicated this in the report. 42 sits quite a bit higher than the site does. So when you reach the point of the pylon sign or go farther towards the proposed parking lot, you do fall away from 42. You'll see the brick columns within the canopy, EIFS. You'll also notice a substantial amount of brick in EIFS within the store. The car wash is in the background here, again, designed of brick, similar to what we've seen at Highway 13 and Nicollet. It does satisfy the ordinance requirements. Here's an image looking almost due west. If you were on Irving, looking straight west, the Cub Foods and the shopping center are behind this image, and you'll see just different angles of the car wash and the fueling station. As I indicated, there is currently no stormwater management on site, so the applicant has proposed underground tanks as a form of treatment. this is a benefit. Without this redevelopment, the site would continue without stormwater management, so the rainwater is getting treated on site before it enters the city system. There are 2 deviations, as I indicated, and staff is in full support of the application. There was one condition, excuse me. One condition with approval. As indicated on the site plan, there are adjustments being made to the shared access and parking with the adjacent shopping center. Let me get in just a little bit closer. You'll see drive lanes being added through here. The proposed, yes, it will be. Thank you. Proposed drive lanes around the back of the building on the Holiday site, which do not currently exist, and reconfiguration of these parking stalls to fit within the site. Triland Property, which is the adjacent ownership, did supply a letter to me this afternoon. I did pass it on to the Planning Commission, indicating they are not supportive of these easement changes right now, and had requested the Planning Commission postpone or delay the public hearing. Unfortunately, because the notices were sent out, we do have to review the application. Here are the number of parking stalls that would be affected with the proposal. This is the existing configuration of the gas station with the change in the parking lot. Triland has raised concerns with that. At this point, staff feels with the condition in place, it allows the Planning Commission to review this. Should you choose, you can advance it to the City Council. The revision of the easement documents and whatever documents need to be associated with that are private matters, if you will, connected with the subject property and the adjacent property. Obviously, we want these owners to get along. We feel this is a positive redevelopment of the site. We will not issue building permits for the redevelopment until we have confirmation that these issues have been resolved. I think the applicant can address that should the Planning Commission have questions, but at this point, staff is recommending approval of the application with the project, with the condition. Dave Edquist from Holiday Station Stores is here. Dave was involved with the last project in town and is happy to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Slaney. Are there questions of city staff? Mr. Slaney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, Chris, I got a few questions. You mentioned in your statement a little bit before you close that the city will not provide a permit until the dispute, if I might use that word, between the applicant and the neighbor regarding parking space that they are using up, until that is settled. Am I right?
That is correct, simply because it's not directly tied to the parking. It's tied more to the access to the site. We understand the applicant is changing the configuration.
Okay.
And it is fair for the adjacent property owner to have those easements resolved.
Next, I don't know much about this, but I just want from you, when you have a car wash, obviously you use a lot of water. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that comes with the cars when you wash them. And it is stated in the background information that the applicant will provide some kind of a system to purify or to make the water, to take away all the impediments or that kind of thing that should not go in the water system. Are you satisfied with that? That's
Correct, Mr. Chair, Commissioner. Staff has reviewed that. Holiday is aware of those issues. Obviously, it is water and money. They spend quite a bit. There are actually a couple of functions in place to try to conserve or reuse water, but there is a system in place to treat that before it enters the city stormwater.
and staff is satisfied with that system?
Correct.
Okay. My last question, the trash enclosure, it will be on the western side of the building, not on the western side of the car wash.
Correct.
Okay.
If I misspoke, Commissioners, I apologize. I can.
No, I don't think you did. I don't think, I just want to be clear where the enclosure will be.
It is attached to the building on the west side. Here is the, for all intents and purposes, the back of the building, the back of the coolers. This is the restroom, and here is the attached trash enclosure. It is accessed from the west side through said easements by the haulers.
What material will it be made of?
Brick. You'll, with the exception of the roll-up doors on that west facade, you wouldn't know it was a trash enclosure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Julik?
Thank you, Chair. Just one more question on the car wash. Does it go to the stormwater system and not the sanitary?
I better let Brian answer that before I misspeak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission members. It actually does go to the sanitary sewer system after it goes through this flammable waste trap and reclaim process. Again, I think they're reusing a lot of the water, but essentially the water that does get to the sanitary sewer system is purified enough to go to the treatment plant to be treated further at that point.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe we'll bring the applicant up later and we'll.
Well, yeah, that was just a concern. I didn't know it could go into the stormwater system. And then just on, and maybe you don't know, I mean, is it just an access easement that's in question and that needs to be provided, or is it,
And it,
I mean,
it
obviously
is-
you can see there's some impact on the parking, but,
correct. It is both parking and access.
okay. All right, thank you. And so, question.
Mr. Tahiri?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the question I have, it relates to underground fuel tanks. I assume I may be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong. Do you remove and replace the existing fuel tanks? And if so, based on my past projects, you have to go through either phase 1 or phase 2 process. Is the city requiring for this process for the report?
The city, the city is and isn't directly tied to that. We will require that the old tanks come out of the ground fully. And as part of that, we do get a report of the phase 1 environmental. That is actually dictated, I'm not sure if it's the state or the county that handles that process. We get a copy of it, that's about it. I know the applicant is well versed on that and can address it better than I can.
So the approval will be based on the report the city received on on the result of the?
We'll have not only demo permits that will address the old tanks, but then building permits that would address the design or the construction of the new tanks also.
Thank you. My other question is, I'm looking at the overall layout, number of stations. Maybe it's just my view here. It seems kind of tight based on the site itself. Do we have any ordinance that dictates the ratio of station to the site acreage? It's just by looking at this, I just see a traffic to be pretty tight around the station to and around the facility.
Commissioners, staff agrees. I think the applicant would agree. It is a tough site. It is a tight site to redevelop. There is not a specific ratio or calculation to number of pumps and size and so forth. I do know the applicants went through any number of reiterations on this. Staff is comfortable with it. Because it is a current gas station, there are pumps being added, but there would not be an adverse impact to traffic in the neighborhood. We feel this is the best position at this point.
I guess my main concern is I see some gas stations, the cars are lining up on the side or having a tough time to get in and out. Just by looking at the overall, the flow of this scenario, I'm having a little tough time to envision how smooth maneuvering would be. I can't. I'm not convinced. It may be just my view on this, and maybe wrong.
Commissioners, it's a valid concern. I think from staff's position, we feel it's a tremendous improvement from what's there, because it is quite a few less pumps. You do get cars lined up. You do get conflicts when cars are done pumping and trying to leave the site. Granted, it is tight, but we feel this is an improvement from where we are today.
Thank you.
Mr. White?
Yeah, I'll comment and then I do have a question, but I was just filling up air in my tires at this station yesterday. I live close to here, and I am very much in agreement with Chris regarding the improvement. It's right now you get cars stacking already because there just isn't enough room to handle the traffic coming through. So I'm excited about the change from that perspective, but the question I had was, is there an air pump anywhere here? I know they have one today. Is there a plan for that somewhere? Because as we're talking about congestion of flow, I'm not seeing any, and that's fine. I just wondered if there was.
There is a pump. Commissioners, it is on some of the other plans. It is right up front here. It's actually enclosed in the building to keep it warm and clean, etc. It is in the building here and accessed from one of these parking stalls. So you pull into a head install and the air pump's right there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Slaney, I have a few questions. So, walk me through the garbage collection. Will that be like a big metal, I don't know what you call them, dumpster? So the garbage truck will pull up to the back and block the car wash entrance, pick up the garbage, and take off?
Correct, Commissioners. Let me jump to a different image. This should be the west facade. So this is what you'll see essentially from the Cub parking lot. The two overhead doors sit here. I'll use a couple images at once here. Here's the two overhead doors. Those reflect the two dumpsters that are proposed. You're exactly correct. The trash hauler would come around the back of the building, pull in. The driver, I assume it's a driver or a holiday employee, actually rolls the dumpsters out, trash gets dumped, and the dumpsters go back inside, and the doors come back down. The limited time that takes to occur, staff didn't have a concern with the car wash stacking. Obviously, the applicant has some discretion with trash pickup, not complete discretion, but I think that's something they're comfortable with.
Okay. So moving to the south exit, is that, how far away from 42 is that? And does that fit within our standards?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I don't know that number off the top of my head.
150 feet.
150 feet, correct.
And that's what it is now. So it meets the requirements now, I would assume.
It seems kind of close when you're pulling out of there up the hill and trying to make a left-hand turn, but I just wanted to make sure. Do we know where deliveries will be handled and where the trucks will be parked?
Yes, Commissioners, depending on the size or the type of delivery, they can be accessed in a similar fashion as the trash. If you'll see here, trash is here. There is a door right here off the back. There are a few steps involved, so depending on what it is, product might come in the back door, in which case there's very little conflict with people using the pumps and so forth. Anything else would come in the front door, or excuse me, come in the front. There is a door right here that can be used for deliveries, so they're not using the customer door, whether vehicles sit right here or happen to sit in front of the store.
So if they come in through the back door, we're expecting them to dodge people going into the car wash to get inside the building?
Depending on the time of the deliveries,
Okay.
it would be obviously a scheduling. There is a requirement in the ordinance, I believe it's 6,000 or 7,000 square feet. If you've got a retail building, such as a restaurant or something like this, where you break a certain threshold, you're required to have a designated loading dock. Because of the size of this, there is not a specific loading dock.
My concern is we normally don't put loading docks and, traffic flow in the same area. You don't put garbage cans in the same area that we were expecting people to drive through. And I know on, certain times of the day or year, the line can be quite long at the car wash. So I have some concerns around that. The landscape buffer along the front of the street, does it satisfy our ordinance if we look at the whole part of it and not just the portion that's on their property line?
Correct, Mr. Chair. Let me make sure we're looking. If we use the
Yeah, those right
the curb-to-curb median or landscape area, it does satisfy the ordinance. You'll see this darker line is the property line, so it does cut a significant way through that green space.
Okay. So it does satisfy it as it sits, it's just not enough of it lies on their property.
Correct.
Okay. You know what, I forgot when we talked about deliveries, where do we envision the semi-full of gas parking and restocking their tanks? 'Cause I know that can impede traffic flow quite a bit.
The tanks are located here. The new tanks are located here. To be honest, that's something I haven't reviewed with the applicant, but we can get to that in a minute.
Oh, okay. I know when they came to the build one down on 13 and Nicollet, there was a lot of talk about outdoor speakers and TVs. I know when I go there now, talking to me and stuff, but that's all within our ordinance. I thought we couldn't have outdoor speakers.
In certain zoning districts, or I should say in certain locations, if you're directly across the street from residential, you're not entitled to have it. In this situation, it would operate the same as any other holiday, where they do have the TVs and the speakers. Staff did have a concern with it, but based on the distance from the residential, there is residential on the north side of McAndrews. That is still a good distance, and McAndrews is a 4-lane, pretty heavily trafficked. If this were in a different situation or a different corner, we would have concern with that.
Okay. And then in our report, it says they're putting a metal banding around the roof to hide the equipment on top?
Correct. This is nice concept that Holiday has developed. Again, it works very well in their existing store. Because of the grade changes on 42, the parapets will screen everything from Irving and the adjacent shopping centers, but we're sitting 5 or 6 feet higher in this location. So it is a textured metal panel. It would feel like EFIS, but the metal paneling gives you the higher quality for durability.
Okay. And so is that it's not a painted product, is it? It's a baked on?
It's not painted on site.
Okay.
It comes on site ready to be
Put up.
yeah, pre-finished. Thank you.
Those are typically stronger, so we don't have to repaint them every so often.
Correct.
Okay. So walk me through the history of this, because it seems like we're trying to jam the biggest building we can in this odd-shaped lot. At one time, did Holiday own that whole property?
Correct.
And when they sold it off, did they plat this out separately, or?
It had been platted, and I apologize, I don't know when that subdivision took place, but Lindale Terminal, aka Holiday, did own the entire block.
Okay.
At some point, this gas station, I assume for tax purposes, was divvied up into its separate triangle, as we see it here. They did not subdivide and sell at the same time. Lindale Property continued to own and operate both parcels until more recently they sold the shopping center.
Okay.
The applicant may give us a little more history on that, but I do know the subdivision came first and then the sale came later.
The concern I have is that Holiday put themselves in this position, and now we're forced to deviate from our ordinances if we want them to improve their building, which admittedly would be a great improvement over what they have now. But they put themselves in this position. It's no fault of the city. So that's just kind of my concern I have. But I'll go to Mr. Julik.
Thank you, Chair. On the, I believe it's the landscaping plan, it shows some islands and landscaping off-site on the adjacent site that has the Cub store.
Correct.
Are those included in the green space calculations and such?
They are not. Not all of them are included. If I can.
I guess I'll simplify the question maybe.
Just
Is any of their required landscaping proposed to be off their site?
no. None of the calculations are based on the subject site.
So these are shown primarily for the purposes of how traffic could flow, et cetera, once they've done their
The
stuff.
final product, if you will.
Okay, all right, and then maybe this answers a couple of the other questions or concerns. I think Commissioner Tahiri raised it. I mean, in reality, doesn't our ordinance, I mean, he says, how much can you fit into a box? Don't our ordinances control that with the green space requirements and with the building height restrictions? I mean, it's essentially all you get, right?
Building height, setbacks. I didn't mention this before, but there is even a setback for that the gas canopy, which is satisfied by the application.
And so if I look back and look at the deviations here, and fortunately my computer's slowing down here, but the only reason for the green space and setback deviations is primarily where the right of way actually comes through that island or whatever right along Nicollet there. It's there's plenty of green space there. It's just happened to be that some of it was already dedicated right away.
Correct.
Okay, and there's no intent to expand Nicollet in the near future, or excuse me, Irving in the near future there?
There is not, and to your point, Commissioner, the total site does supply more than the minimum for green space.
So even though it's a very packed site, it's from a green space requirement, et cetera, it meets the ordinance.
And exceeds what's there today.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is around the stacking with the gas station there. I guess my concern is I'm just wondering how much space there is or how many car lengths there are. Just envisioning a case where you have someone, say the second or third car here, where they don't have the opportunity to pull out of the spillway necessarily, but they want to get out, hitting it in reverse and backing into a car that's pulling in or something like that. It just seems like kind of a long area there to lock people in. How many car lengths is that, and are there other solutions we've looked at to address that?
Certainly. This is sheet SP1, which is in your packet. There are some dimensions on here, but difficult to read. From the curb, we'll take this first pump, from the curb to the end of the pump, that is just over 35 feet. So certainly it does look a little tight, but that would be 2+ car lengths.
I'm looking at the car wash.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. The stacking at the car wash. So what I'm seeing here is you got to go around the back of the building to get in line, and you sort of potentially have a blind spot here where you're coming around the corner, and you've got stacking then ahead of you. I'm wondering how deep that stacking is there before you have the opportunity to pull out.
There were, in total, there was a different image, I apologize. They had 6 vehicles in the queue for the gas station, or excuse me, for the car wash, and the 6th one sat about here.
Okay.
So it would be 3, if not 4, car lengths before you could get to that bypass lane.
Okay. Is there a reason to curb people in there versus just leaving that open there? I guess I'm trying to understand what that little bubble is. Is that green space there? Or I don't think it is.
Right in here?
Yep.
Correct. It's green space. I think it's it just brings a level of aesthetics to the site versus a curb or something like that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Tahiri?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 questions. One is what are the existing number of islands, pumps, as it is in the facility?
I knew that at one time, but I apologize. I know the applicant knows it because we've discussed it. This is an increase, but I can't tell you the numbers. We can get to that in a second.
Okay, so we don't know the number of pumps. That was my follow-up question, the number of pumps. So we can't
It is an
compare the
increase.
existing to...
It is an increase from existing to proposed.
My other question is going back to that phase 1 environmental. In case we do the assessment and we discover there are some leakage or contaminations to the soil due to the existing fuel tanks or removal, again, based on one of the experience I ran into, the cost of that is tremendous. It's a cost that I don't know if the owner can pick up, and in some cases even been passed on to the city or shared by the city or the county due to volume or the amount of the cost. So in case that scenario happens, could you run through what your plan B would be on this?
It's not something the city would incur costs on. I think the applicant can address it, but my guess is they've dealt with this before.
We'll bring up the applicant when we're done. Mr. Terry, we'll bring up the applicant when we're done.
Okay.
Asking Mr. Slania, and we can ask him directly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the Commissioner for City Staff? I'll invite Mr. Edquist to come up. I wrote down a few questions, and so for the record, please state your name and address.
Certainly. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Dave Edquist, Manager of Real Estate for Holiday Station Stores. Happy to be here tonight in front of you. And
can you just give us your business address?
Yes, I'm sorry. Business address is 4567 American Boulevard West, Bloomington, Minnesota 55437.
Thank you.
Sorry
Thank
about
you. I wrote down 4 questions. Should we jump into those first, and then you can?
Yeah, in fact, I didn't get all the questions written down, so I'd appreciate those, and I will do my very best to answer all of them. I think I do have answers for most of them, if not
The
all.
first one I wrote down was about the car wash. Can you just tell us about the process that you use to, clean up the water before you put it back into our system?
Certainly, we all of our car washes now have what we call a reclaim system, which reclaims all of the wash water that's been used. I shouldn't say all of it. Should be a 70% reclaim system. What that means is that 70% of the water that we used was used on a car previous, but it is clean water. It goes into 3 holding tanks, and the sediments settle out in each one of the holding tanks before it goes back through a filtration system and brings the water back clean. So we're not using any kind of dirty water, but we're cutting our water usage by 70%. So that is a great thing from an environmental standpoint. Within our system, we do have a, here I go, the water, help me with the
Flammable waste trap.
Flammable waste traps that take out the oils and flammable particles that do come off cars, oil and so forth. So it's a very green car wash, if you will.
Thank you. Next one I have, nobody asked this yet, but I wrote it down. When do you plan on starting, and how long will you be down for before you open up a new store?
We would like to be tearing down and building here in the spring. That's our plan. If we don't get going on this, we have significant issues with the current building that need to be addressed. So it is our goal to get our project worked out with Triland, which we believe will happen, and I'd be happy to discuss that in more detail. But we would like to be going here as early as we can in the spring.
Okay. How long does it typically take for you to?
Well, typically it's about between 90 and 120 days, depending on weather. And obviously pulling tanks and so forth. If there are issues underground, maybe I should just jump into that right away.
That was my next question. Is can you describe that process and maybe some of the environmental or agencies that are involved in?
Certainly, we are regulated. When you pull tanks, you're regulated by the state of Minnesota. So we plan to pull these tanks completely and put in all brand new double wall fiberglass tanks. So and lines, everything is brand new in this, with the exception of this sign that we asked to be able to keep up on the corner of Irving and 42. So all new tanks, all new lines, all new dispensers. Whenever we pull tanks, we have to do an environmental assessment, and we have to report that to the state of Minnesota. They then, in turn, set forth requirements. If there is contamination, they tell us what we need to do. We do exactly what they tell us to do. If there is contamination there and they have us remove soil, we remove it. We dispose of it properly, proper landfills. Everything is regulated by the state. Everything is overseen by the state and a consultant. So it's not a problem. We've done this a number of times. We have 450 stores in our company. We are, we're here for the long haul. So we're very well set up to handle these things, and we follow through with exactly what we're supposed to do.
So I'm just to reiterate, the state controls that, and they issue maybe a permit or license to operate, and then the city just looks to that to see that you have the proper approval.
Right.
Okay. And then there's a question about the number of pumps that you have now and going to in the future.
Right. And there actually are the same number of dispensers as there is today. There are 5 currently on site. Oops, I'm sorry. However, the configuration allows it to be a little more user-friendly. You'll see right now that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a trash container in the middle here. However, this dispenser can never be used when there are vehicles parked here and here, and this is a diesel dispenser. So this is really not a usable dispenser at this point in time. The beauty of the layout here is, as Chris indicated, vehicles can pull in, whether it's this driveway or this driveway. They can either come this way, they can come around this way and face away, but ideally customers that pull in and face the building is the ideal scenario. So we do have the same number of fueling points, if you will, although on the previous sketch you noticed that one of them really couldn't be used. So we are increasing the opportunity to serve people quicker. Right now we're getting backed up pretty good. The way this is laid out is far more efficient, far more, tremendously less, what's the word I want? Less conflicts as people utilize the store. And we actually have stores that operate quite well that are tighter than this site. These, I believe, we actually do have more room to maneuver on the lot with this layout than we did with the parallel pumps. For example, you'll notice that right up in here, this gets to be a pretty tight area. I should look at my drawing. This gets to be a pretty tight area in through here currently because people park up in through here, so it really takes away from the circulation on the site. Whereas with this, you've got circulation room, but you've also got parking here that doesn't interfere, so people aren't parking across the front, they're parking head-in. So this head-in design for the dispensers works really well, and it allows us to get parking up front, and it gets everybody much closer to the front of the store, which is always a good goal in the middle of the winter. So.
Okay. There was a couple of people brought up, myself included, about the car wash and kind of the stacking back there, and it seems odd to be trapping people in if they get caught in a long queue and not get out. Was there any other ideas looked at?
This actually, we've run into this a number of times, and we constantly look for an escape lane, and so we've provided that, and the reason we provided it here was that typically part of it was green space, obviously. Part of it is the protection for vehicles traversing through the cub lot so that somebody doesn't come around this corner and cut the thing short and have an accident with one of the cars waiting in line. It's a defined area for the cars to be. And typically, there are times of the year that we get stacks of cars, and so we want to have an escape route, and we believe that typically people will be willing to wait 1 or 2 or 3 cars before they if something requires them to pull out, they're willing to wait till the cars get up to this point and move out. We've had this design in places, not this exact design because we don't have a lot like this, but we wanted to make sure we gave that opportunity for people to be able to escape, and we think that this is an adequate amount of space to, an adequate place for this to be to allow cars to escape.
So I've been in some of your other stores with the car wash, but it's usually like a double lane, so you can kind of escape anytime you want, and then there's that turnout at the last moment. So I have seen those designs. I know the one down in off of 13 doesn't really have a defined wait area. Cars just kind of queue up along the wall.
Right.
If it gets backed up more than, I think, 3 cars is what you can hold. It just seems, if somebody got trapped in there, they might be waiting 15 minutes to get out, even to get out to that spot where they can escape out.
It certainly could happen, and it certainly does have something to do with the site constraints, and I'll go into that. I think you mentioned that we sort of put ourselves in this situation, and there's a history that goes back with this property, and that is that we used to own the whole property. As we got out of the grocery store business, we continue to own this parcel, and we, much like Triland, leased to other tenants, including Cub. We've had a long relationship with Cub. And when we got to a point where Triland approached us to buy the property, our vision, as it was very consistent with Triland. Triland hope was to redevelop this entire site and get a brand new Cub or brand new grocery store and other shops, which would increase their leasing space. At that point in time, we were looking ahead to, well, when they do that, we will rebuild. Well, with the market crash, Triland bought the property just before the market crashed. With the market crash and with Cub having their issues themselves, their redevelopment has not come along in the time that they thought or we thought. So at the time, we had parceled this off just to make sure that Triland was getting enough property to be able to develop what they wanted to develop, and then we would cooperate with them and work on a development scheme. So in one sense, we did put ourselves in this predicament, but it wasn't by design. It was to provide Triland with as much space as possible to allow them to redesign their area, and then we would reconfigure the lot and fit in with what they were doing. So long story, but I wanted you to understand why we didn't try to keep more property than we did. Hope that helps.
I see your point. Thanks. Was anything else you had to add?
Oh, I'm sorry. I get long-winded. I apologize. So I'm good.
Okay, we'll go to questions then. Mr. Slania?
Dave, could you just walk through how you envision a fuel truck coming in? I know you and I did not cover that. Where they would sit or fill up the tanks.
Typically the tankers and this obviously would be. Oops, where am I at here? Sorry. This being County Road 42, they would come in. The second entrance, is my understanding, is they would come in here and they would then come around and drop right in here. These are the tank areas here. And so they would come in and end up parking like this while they refuel. And typically our refueling is done, there are times that typically it's done on the overnight. But obviously there's times when gas sales increase and we have to have tankers in there. But so they would enter, they would unload right here, and then they would access out through either Cub or back out the front of the building. But that becomes a congestion thing, a congestion issue. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Julik?
And again, maybe this is stepping beyond bounds. Thanks, Chair. But the cross-access agreements, will any of them prevent this design from being
realized?
They could. We have a great relationship with Triland. It may not sound that way, but there are some things happening in Triland that are affecting this, and we expect we have a meeting with them on Wednesday. We expect to have discussions with them on this, and we hope to have this resolved with them. They are trying to get a total redevelopment going at some point in time with Cub. Don't know where that stands, but we expect that when we are able to sit down and chat with them, that if it's not Wednesday, we believe that it'll be good progress towards getting an agreement with them. And we clearly understand we can't do anything, can't move forward without their cooperation and interest. So,
Thank you. Mr. White?
So my first question, I noticed one of the mock-ups had the price of gas at $2.86. Is that going to be consistent? No, but my actual question, so I think Mr. Slaney may be able to answer this better. There's 12 parking spots shown in this, and that's technically it's taking away from what is there today, but I believe there's 11 spots currently that are in front of the store. The remaining, I don't remember, I looked at it a little bit ago, 10 or 12 spots are behind the store and really aren't used. Does that present an issue from an ordinance perspective as far as how many spots are needed on the site?
Good question, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Because we're looking at the full redevelopment, we eliminated or almost discounted what was there today. So based on the current ordinance, the size of the proposed store and the number of pumps they had, the required amount was 21. So between the stalls in front of the store, the head-end stalls in front of the store, and what they can count towards the pump, they're proposing 24, which exceeds that ordinance. So in a situation where they were trying to retain the store or retaining part of the site, we would look at the old parking calculations, but here we've basically scrapped it and started over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that question, so are we envisioning employees park on the adjacent property?
That's what staff envisioned, but that's it's completely up to the discretion of the two property owners because of the shared access.
Where they park today.
and that's the agreement we have now. We currently have
regardless of where they
shared-
park today, it's we can't really count those as parking spots unless they have a shared parking agreement in place. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And we do have that in place, but we now need them to approve this change. Please keep in mind that there are 2 parking spots right here also. So we have more on site plus the...
I was thinking those are the vacuum, but you don't have any vacuums?
No, that would be the vacuum area, but
Okay.
they are not used very often. And we do have a side entrance here, and certainly people will use that to...
Yeah, that might generate some conflicts if... Yeah, never
Mr.
mind.
Chair, let me rephrase that. If it may not be Holiday's choice to have their employees, parked right up in front of the store, but based on their calculation, without any help from Tri-Land, they do satisfy the
Okay,
ordinance.
so they don't need those...
They don't
shared
need the
parking.
stalls behind the building to satisfy it.
Okay. And if they choose to park there, that's up to them?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Edquist. This is a public hearing, and at this time, I'll open up the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter, now is your time. Please come forward. And seeing no one, I will close the public hearing and open up for discussion. Nobody wants to say anything today?
Thank you,
Mr. White, we'll go to, push the button if you want.
I support this. I think, as I've said, the current site is far from what I think we'd like to see there. I think the proposal, while it certainly has its shortcomings, is a long ways towards where we want to be, and I think we could certainly nitpick over whether to try to enforce, some of the things we'd like to see, but I think to make it workable for Holiday and workable for everybody involved, this is a good proposal. So I support it.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Terry?
I think that this project has a good start. I look at, based on the existing plan, mainly we have 4 small pump islands, and we're increasing it, expanding it to 5 long pump islands here. My opinion is we are congesting lots of stuff into a very small, tight. I envision and concern about traffic jam and concern about some of the issues I've seen in some tight gas stations. Basically, I consider it as a nightmare that vehicles cannot get in and out, and based on what I see at this point, I cannot support this project.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. We'll go back to Mr. White.
I think to address Mr. Tahiri's concern, the issues that this site has with stacking today, with people waiting for the pumps, there's already a problem with congestion. I don't think this is creating a new problem. In fact, I think it's relieving the valve on some of the congestion that's happening today. As was noted already, the location of the building today is closer to the road, so while there's certainly a smaller space for the pumps, there really isn't a lot of space for navigation today on that site. So I think that they're doing a really good job of addressing congestion that exists today and actually opening things up.
Thank you, Mr. White. We'll go to Mr. Julik.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with Commissioner White. I do frequent this gas station, and the way the existing pumps are configured, you basically have access for maybe 8 cars. This gives you access for 10 cars, so it improves the stacking situation, and it allows stacking kind of without spilling onto the road. I think it improves the congestion at the site dramatically, and personally, I don't think the site looks that bad now, but any redevelopment of a building is going to improve. It's going to probably improve the efficiencies of the building and the efficiencies of the site, and plus they have a car wash. I sincerely hope that they can work out the issues with the adjacent property owner, but I think it's a good plan. I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Julik. Mr. Corey?
I'll be supporting it. I think it's an improvement. I concur with Commissioner White. We can nitpick, but I mean, it is what it is. It's the site that you have to live with. We can either move forward and have a brand new building with new pumps and add a car wash and have a new configuration that's better than it is now, or we can just say no and it would stay as it is and potentially just go away. So I think that yes, if we had a whole bunch of more spaces and we could put the garbage collection on some other side, maybe that would be preferable, but this is the best that we can do with what they have, and I think they've done a very nice job, and I would be supporting it.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. Mr. Singh, you want to throw in your 2 cents, or you want me to go?
Since you insist, I wouldn't resist.
Okay.
The bottom line here is this is an improvement. And, the property where we are, those of us who know it, is a triangle. It's not the best property or piece of property to add, for example, car wash, and to put in a new building there, and to do things to improve the access of customers. I think the applicant has done a very good job. It will be better than what it is now, and if they can work out the agreement with Triland, I think it would be great. I, without any hesitation, as the chair, commissioners, I'll be supporting this, and I appreciate the applicant working with staff to, come to an agreement, and as presented here, I don't have any problem with it.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. So I do agree that this is a great improvement over what we have today. The building will be a much nicer looking building and more aesthetically pleasing building. I don't even go there now because of the gas pump situation, unless I'm out of gas and coasting down the hill. Because I agree, it's very congested. That's kind of the old way of doing gas pumps, and the layout they have now is kind of the new way. All the new stores you go to have this type of configuration. However, Holiday a long time ago chose to peel this section off. They decided to make it a triangle, and for obvious benefits to them, they made it as small as they could. And now they're coming back to us and asking us to put a large building on that site. That's their choice, and they're adding a car wash, which is their choice, not ours. And they're asking us to kind of look away at obvious deficiencies in the layout of the site, because they want to put 12 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack here. That's my feeling. I would sure hate to be in that car wash lane, especially on these warm days when it really stacks up, and not have a way to get out of there without driving across a curb and median if I had to get out of there quickly for whatever reason. Life happens, and it's about 7 to 8 minutes per cycle of car wash. So if we have 6 cars, it could be a while before you get to that spot where you can get out of there. We're going to be, the garbage guys are going to be, in the way of the flow of traffic to get to the car wash. Delivery trucks could potentially, have to cross that area. And it happens at other sites, but this is the layout that they chose. If this was a new building, a green space, I don't think we'd approve it, and so I just can't support it right now. And we'll go back to Mr. White.
Just a point of clarification on the size of the building. We're seeing, I think it's a 200 square foot increase from what they currently have, correct?
There is just a slight increase, 200 square feet plus the car wash.
Right. So the bulk of the increase is really in the car wash space, correct? Okay. The way that Mr. Slaney was talking made me think that it was much bigger than it currently is, which I'm assuming you're referring to the car wash addition. The size of the building.
I'm just saying that they chose to put this size of building on this piece of property. They don't have to put this size of building on this piece of property. They can make the building smaller and comply with our ordinances. And that's what I mean. It's their choice to do this. It was their choice to, peel off a triangle. It's their choice to try to jam all this stuff on this property right now.
So just as a point of clarification, us supporting this, they still can't do anything without Triland's approval, correct? So this doesn't give them that license.
Correct.
I think we addressed that already. I just want to make sure.
This is a recommendation to the city council.
Right.
If the city council approves it, they would still need that joint.
Sure.
It's a condition here.
Yeah.
We have that as a condition.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Julick?
Thank you, Chair. With all due respect, I know, I think a number of commissioners have put the phrase together, putting something, I think you said a 12-pound potato in a 10-pound sack, something like that. But if you look at the PUD deviations that they're asking for, it's a reduction in the perimeter building landscaping, which, again, you look at a lot of sites and a lot of other stuff that we've approved in the past, the building perimeter landscaping has been a frequent deviation that's been allowed in the PUDs that we've passed in our history, and a lot of it has to do with sometimes the site, but also the building design and what's adjacent to the building, and the fact that it doesn't make sense to have some of the perimeter landscaping right at the building. The other PUD, or the other ordinance deviation is a reduction in the perimeter landscape setbacks. Looks like it's a zero lot line site with respect to the relationship with the neighbor next door. And the other, so that's one part of the issue. The other part of the issue is as related to the right-of-way and that strip along Irving Avenue there. But if you look at the overall site constraints, they're 6% beyond the green area required. The perimeter landscape is about 11% less than the 50% required. But given that they exceed the overall green space, I just personally don't have a problem with it. Yeah, it's on a relatively tight site. It's in a highly developed retail area. It's the busiest area in Burnsville, and so, you know, I support the application. The two minor deviations requested by the applicant are I think insignificant in the whole scheme of things, and so just personally, I'm in favor of the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Julik. Just to, my contention is more around the traffic flow. If this was a new site, I think we'd make them have the setback off of Irving Avenue. I think because we're trying to jam so much in here that we're allowing that. The 50% setback, I was going to talk to Chris and say maybe that's something we want to look at in the future, because I know we've had several buildings come in that couldn't make the 50% around the building just because of the design of the building and how people are accessing building nowadays. You know, McDonald's, I think, was one of them. Just that's how they work today, and it really doesn't match that. So maybe there's some other trade-off that we can give to people instead of doing 50%. My big concern is about traffic flow around this site, especially that around the back area. It seems like we got a lot going on there, and we're kind of trapping people into certain areas. So that's my big concern. And because of how they laid out the site and wanted a car wash and wanted this size of building, they've kind of created that nightmare in the back. So just that's my problem with the site. It isn't the deviations with the landscaping. It's more with traffic flow. So my 2 cents. I think we've everybody's had a chance to speak, so we'll look for a motion. Mr. Julik?
Yeah, let me get back down to the motion here. I went.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the PUD amendment to rebuild the Holiday Gas Station store at 14150 Irving Avenue South with the following condition. 1, prior to release of the building permit, the applicant shall provide copies of agreements with the adjacent property owner addressing access and construction.
And do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Julik, seconded by Mr. Singh. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Aye. And you got the split?
I do.
Okay. And I'm assuming the no's will go to, or the discussion will go to the City Council?
Correct.
And again, this will go to the City Council next Tuesday, February 19th at 5 o'clock, not 6:30, 5 o'clock. Make sure you come early. Okay. I don't want you to miss out. Item number 5 is updates, and this is the time for the commission to update each other or the city staff to update the commission. Any updates from city staff?
The only update staff has, they are still looking for participants in the cable franchising discussion. If you're interested, let me know, and I can send you those dates again, but I just want to let you know that is out there. And we will have a meeting on February 25th.
And we all received a draft copy of the meeting on February 25th, and that will be at 6:30.
Correct.
Last week I attended the City Council meeting, and they showed them our work plan for the year, and they had a few comments, especially around the metal roofs. They want some more information back on the styles and maybe some sampling of what they would look like. So what we originally thought might be something simple is they're very interested in, so we'll be looking at that this year.
Yep. Staff's got some work to do. We'll bring it back to the Planning Commission.
They sent their regards back to the commission, and they know we do a lot of hard work for them and make their lives easier, so they appreciate that, and they wanted me to tell everybody that in case you weren't watching. So thank you all from the council, as they thanked me for all the hard work we do and the heavy lifting we do. So any other updates or comments? Mr. Julik?
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to mention to the listening public that the State of the City address is Wednesday at 11:30 noon.
I don't think it's this Wednesday.
Oh, a week from Wednesday.
A week from
at the Performing Arts Center.
Correct.
I'm sure it's on our website, so
Yeah, check the Burnsville website.
check the Burnsville website, and hope to see you there. Any other updates or comments? Seeing none, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So
A motion made by Mr. Corey, seconded by
second.
Mr. Julik. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and we are adjourned. Thank you, and have a great night.